Welcome to session 11. We have a guest today.
We have a guest. I'm really excited about this
Me
beautiful guest.
Me too. It's been a long time in the works.
Yes.
And she's here. I'm going to give an intro to her, which is going to be a bit lengthy because she's an accomplished woman. Mm-hmm. Today on the podcast, we have Natalie Archibald, who is the VP of People at Clio, which is a cloud-based legal software company based in Vancouver, but global. They have over 1,000 employees, and they're currently valued at $1.6 billion in 2021. Natalie has over 15 years of experience in the people development space. She has worked for global companies, including Aritzia, Kitnase, as well as Adler University, UBC, and Douglas College. She sits on the board of directors for Smart Justice Network of Canada and has been a featured speaker at TEDx on rethinking the impact of traditional justice. I'm not done yet. Is this mortifying for you? Just bear with me. Mortifying. I need to get this out because it's so impressive. She has a master's degree in clinical psychology, is a registered clinical counselor, and in progress of her doctor of education. She is a mother, a wife, a career woman, a phenomenal cook, and with even better music tastes that specializes, I would say, in like the mid-90s to 2000s R&B and hip hop.
Yeah.
And a budding TikToker. I mean, what else? What else can I say? Welcome, Natalie. She's like, I'm going to kill you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome.
This is the best.
Yes,
Thanks for having
we're
me.
so thrilled to have you on the podcast. Actually, as you were doing the intro, I was just noticing that you two look very similar.
We've got a
It's the best
vibe.
compliment I've
We've got a
received.
vibe. Thank you.
What's going on here? Like, who is your?
I don't
Who's your
know.
like style muse? Both of you, because you
That's a
both
really
have
great
very
question. Let's just
similar
bypass
look.
all the career stuff.
Yeah.
Straight to style.
Yeah.
Style muse. Well, I mean, you're the original influencer. We worked together at Kitnase, and I was always like, that girl and her hair.
What? And her hair.
The original influencer.
You were OG influencer before that was even a thing.
This is amazing.
But I don't know. I'm just like, honestly, if I'm getting out of bed and if I've washed my hair, it's a win.
But you're like a fashion
feel
girl.
you.
You're up on trends. You're always
I love
You
it.
know,
It's
polished.
like creative expression.
totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love nice clothes, love textiles. It's like,
Yes. Oh my gosh. Don't even get me started on her house. Okay. So we are here to talk about your chapter 2 moment in your life. Tess is going to give us a little background what that means.
So we love bringing on guests who are really accomplished, successful people. And then we flip the script and we say, what we know to be true is like the most successful, powerful people we know have had a chapter 2 moment. And a chapter 2 moment is when life didn't go perfectly as planned. And you had to make a decision about who you were going to be, the type of life you were going to create, and go about it intentionally. So we want to know about that. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you just riff on that and see what comes up.
I love that this is what you are focusing on for women because I think we give not nearly enough credence to the moments of intentionality in people's lives. And sometimes that means like taking a completely different path. And that is not an easy thing to do when there is a very expected path, especially for women to go down.
Yes.
So thanks
And
for
it's also
covering
just
this.
taking down this veil of like, it was easy, it was perfect. She had it, all the doors open for her seamlessly. Like we just know that's not true, right? And we want to start talking to it and giving life to it so we all feel seen, right?
Yeah, so important.
Yes.
Well, I'll give you a bit of context into...
I think you need to get closer to the mic.
Okay, thank you. I'll give you a bit of context into my session 2 moment.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2. Oh my gosh,
It's so confusing.
It's
'cause
confusing.
Okay, I'll
Saying-
start that again.
Yes.
Okay. I will give you a bit of background into my chapter 2 moment. So my background, as you mentioned in your very lengthy intro, which I feel incredibly uncomfortable about, is as a clinical counselor. And so I worked in crisis mental health settings in jails,
Oh, wow.
grassroots gang intervention settings. And this cultivated in me this deep passion and desire to want to take on social justice issues and really
Right.
transform the way that I saw inequity show up in our societies. And so a lot of my work was really sitting with people in their trauma, like legitimate, deep traumas that they had gone through, and helping them process that and move through it. And like the great privilege of my work was actually being able to sit with a lot of people as they encountered their chapter 2 moments in their lives.
Wow, yeah.
And so I got that unique lens as like a practitioner, being able to do that. And, you know, eventually I started, pivoted my work and started working in organizations. And as Alisha also mentioned, leading people and culture teams. And I found myself a number of years ago working in this incredibly stressful job in a senior leadership role at a company where I was just not feeling values aligned. And as someone who, you know, my early experiences were just all about values alignment and doing something that I felt was going to be impactful in the world. And so that caused an immense amount of stress in me to feel like I was just out of integrity with what I was wanting to do and how I wanted to show up. In the background, I'd also had 2 babies in a year. And I had—
That's right. They're so close together.
They're so close together.
Okay, so how
Yes.
do you do that? How do you have 2 babies in a year? Just
Well, I'll
what's the-
tell you.
Can you work us through the
most-
mechanics of that?
Yeah, you have the most horrible experience with your first one being colicky that you decide if you don't rip that shit off like a Band-Aid,
Yes.
it's never going to happen again.
Yes.
And so you just dive in. That's how you do it.
Were you really sick when you were pregnant?
It was horrific.
Yeah.
Particularly,
I remember this, yeah.
Like, and so this is actually like a huge part of my story. was
Yes.
Right.
I had a really horrible experience with pregnancy with my first, and then an even worse postpartum.
Oh.
And I went back to work very early because I just started this new job. And so I took about 5 or 6 months of mat leave.
Right.
And it was like that experience with this baby that screamed like 20 out of the 24 hours a day was like
Yes.
incredibly traumatizing. I had,
Right.
you know, undiagnosed postpartum depression and postpartum
Yes.
anxiety. And then I immediately got pregnant again, and I had hyperemesis. So I was like throwing up 30 times a day. I was hospitalized. I had horrible
Natalie.
like pelvic like bone shifting. It was like it was
And you
was
had a
gross.
baby
And I had a
while
baby.
this was happening.
Yes, and I was working, you know, like 60 hours a week at this job that I was just
Right.
feeling so disconnected from.
Yes.
And it was, you know, like financially, emotionally, physically, you know, mentally, just a really tough stage of life. And so I, again, went back to work shortly after my second. And I ended up having to really confront that values disconnect at work, which eventually led, and it was a really stressful process, and eventually led to me parting ways with the company. But I was also having a lot of physical challenges after my second that required me to have surgery on my abdomen and to just repair some damage that my 9-pound baby caused
goodness.
on the way out. And so at this time, I went into the surgery grieving the loss of a job, even though it was in my best interest
Right.
to leave. I was incredibly stressed out. I had these 2 young babies, and I'm the child of 2 immigrants. Like, not having my next move lined up really,
Yeah, I get that.
it messed
Yes.
with my self-identity, right? Like,
Yeah.
I've never not worked since I was
Right.
13 years old. So it was a big like identity shift.
Yes.
And so when I was in the surgery, I had this incident where my heart unexpectedly stopped for 5 minutes and I died. And
my God, no.
it was,
Chills. Yeah.
it all kind of culminated in this physiological response. And the doctors thankfully were able to resuscitate me. They performed CPR. They, cracked all my ribs trying to bring me back up, and they couldn't finish the surgery. And after transferring me to the cardiology unit, what was fascinating was they realized that there was absolutely nothing wrong with my heart. There was no physical reason why my heart stopped beating
my
for
God.
5 minutes. And after about a year of work with an internal medicine doctor, I finally figured out that it was an intense stress response.
No.
So there's type A, type B people. Type A people are fight or flight.
Yes.
Your body releases adrenaline. Type B, you're the freeze person. Your body releases anti-adrenaline. You play dead.
Yes.
But in an extreme stress response, my body released too much anti-adrenaline and I actually died. And it was all a function of untreated, undiagnosed PTSD. And it had culminated and turned into sort of like latent PTSD from all of the, birth stuff, stress stuff with work, and turned into what is called central sensitization syndrome, which is basically when your body just can't differentiate between real threats and perceived threats, and you're just in a constant state of activation.
Right.
Wow.
And so it just, as soon as I got that diagnosis, everything clicked for me. I realized how out of control my life had become. I wasn't like the parent or mom I wanted to be. I had one speed, full throttle.
Right.
And I wasn't taking care of myself. I was unable to lose weight 'cause my non-essential body functions, like my metabolism had stopped working, and it just wasn't okay. And I knew I needed to change. And so it literally took like dying for me to get there.
Insane.
This is like craziest chapter
I
2
feel like
moment.
crying.
I literally just need a moment.
I know, I
we
can
might
laugh
need
now.
a group cry.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. Can we just pause there?
Yeah.
What's
So,
coming up for you?
okay, so I think like a couple of things coming up for me. It's interesting because I think a lot of times women get a lot of validation for being full throttle and for like being the one who does everything and gets everything done. So we don't even realize like this is harmful until something like that happens, like a crisis, right? And so first of all, thank you for being so like vulnerable with sharing all of this, particularly around like pregnancy and motherhood not being perfect, right? Like when so much of what we're fed is like pregnancy is just this like glowing, and you're throwing up 30 times a day. Like that is a reality for a lot of people.
I mean, I got into counseling because like at my core, I'm a nurturer. So I was like, I should just do this for my job.
Right.
Yes.
And I always thought transitioning into motherhood would be like the easiest, most natural thing in the world for me. And it was the complete opposite. And I just don't think enough people talk about how
really don't.
massive that shift is and how disproportionately the burden is felt by the mom because of the physical experience of not only pregnancy and carrying this kid, but like the emotional and hormonal havoc that gets wreaked on
Guilt
you
is so
afterwards.
real.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I feel like so many women are going to be listening to this first part and it's just going to be nodding.
Yes.
and feeling and nodding and feeling and nodding. And I wonder, like, when was the last time we heard somebody be so raw about that experience? So again, thank you. And this is exactly why we want to do this type of podcast. My second thing, before we let you go on, is as somebody very curious about the spirit world, did you have, like, you had a near-death experience, you had a death experience. Did you see, feel, experience anything in that you remember?
Okay, I was not going to bring this up.
Thank you.
Because not a lot of people are
Like
good
where
with
this is
like the
going.
woo-woo. But
Yes.
I'm going to tell you because
Bring it on.
So the first, because I had to have 2 surgeries. They couldn't finish the first one.
Right.
So the first time when I was going under, I just really tried to focus on like my grandparents who are not with us, but they're like the stabilizing, like symbol of strength in my life. And I like saw my grandfather's face and he was like, it's going to be okay. And, but I was like, so not good in that moment. And then obviously what happened. In between, like the 10 days in between the surgeries, that was actually the most frightening part for me because I knew I had to go in again and I knew what happened the first time.
Yeah.
So I went and saw like a healer, like a traditional Chinese medicine woman, and she gave me some really great like grounding strategies and talked a lot about the importance of the energy in the room going into the second
I love that.
surgery. And so before the surgery, all of the doctors, as you can imagine, were like scared shitless for the
Right.
second one because like my surgeon was like, I've been doing this for 30 years. This has never happened to me before. You are the one in a million. Everyone was like on edge and you could feel it.
Yes.
And so I made everyone, like I was like on the surgery table, I made everyone hold hands, like the nurses, the doctor. And I looked at them and I just said, I want you to know you got this. You are the most
She is going to make me
smart
cry.
people in the room.
Wow.
You know how to do this. I believe in you. I am grateful for you. You're giving me the gift of being able to pick up my grandkids in 30 years because I'm going to regain
so
body stability.
moving.
Yes.
And I
want
want
to
you to
that
know
medical team and be like, what was that like?
I want you to know that you're going to be okay. We are going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And they all we were all crying. The doctors were crying. They were like, that was the best pre-op speech we could have. Thank you. And everyone just immediately was like, the energy shifted. And then I saw my grandfather again as I was going under, and he was like, you're going to be okay. You got this. And it was the importance of that spiritual connection, but the energetic connection.
Yeah.
So no, I didn't see the light or anything like that. The drugs were
better.
good.
This is
but
better.
I feel control what you can control.
We all have that power to do that, to shift the energy, right?
Yeah.
We talk about it in really safe ways. You can shift your energy by going on the treadmill for 10 minutes, but we can do it in these really poignant, scary moments too, where it takes something from you to make the first step and be like, okay, this feels kind of cringe to do this, but everyone's on board. Everyone's automatically oh, I'm all in for this.
I talk about this at work all the time with managers who are working with really green employees and the power of developing others, right? And I say sometimes you need to let other people borrow your confidence. You need to realize when other people need a dose of confidence or that vote of you got this, I believe in you.
Yes.
And that's what I think I was trying to do at the time was I know you got this, even if you don't know you got this. And you need to hear that and you need to borrow that because I also need you to have this.
Yes.
My kids need you to have this,
And
right?
you're the most unlikely person in the room to lead that, but you just did it and took it. So I'm taking a lot away from that. And Alisha and I always say, when we're coaching people who are looking for work to reach out to senior people in organizations and say, hey, would you mind making an introduction or getting my resume to the right person? We always encourage them to say and offer, please let me know if there's anything I can do for you. Because we automatically think if someone has a higher title than us or a more senior position or they're a doctor, we can't do anything for them, but we so can. We really, really can.
Yes. It's so true. It's reciprocity, right?
Yeah.
And that's the greatest gift we can give each other.
Yes.
Especially because all the experiences we go through in life are so designed to make us feel more isolated that when people know that there's a cycle of giving and receiving.
Yes.
And it only works in tandem with each other. That's so powerful.
Right. Because those people are human too, and they need that too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did they bring it up afterwards?
Yes. Yes.
Were they what was that? Thank you.
They were that was unexpected. We've never had a patient take control of the room like that. And I was look, if I'm going out, I'm going to try everything I can.
100%.
Yeah. Really.
Yeah, I'm super into that. It's very inspiring. Before we move on, can you just share the names of your children? Because Tess is going to love this.
Sure.
They're so good.
They're Leo and Luna.
Oh,
So Leo's 6 and Luna's 4. Yeah.
So beautiful. Okay, so they're really young still. So this wasn't long ago that this.
No.
Wow. Okay.
The surgery was 3 years ago in January.
Oh my God.
Wow. I'm amazed that you're able to talk about it already and share. You've obviously processed it,
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think we go through these really traumatic experiences. Ideally, we can process them and then share them. That's the last stage of the learning process or processing process when we can then ideally support somebody else, right? Who's going through something like that. So you're doing this in record time.
Yes.
It's back to your word of intentionality, right? I think that to me was the chapter 2 moment of if I don't make this my job, nothing will change.
Right.
And there might not be another opportunity to do it, right?
Yes.
That's how it showed up for me was the biggest of all wake-up calls.
Yeah.
And it's it's now or never.
And that's a good way to talk about your chapter 2 moments are often a wake-up call, a big, often slap in the face. And it's everything kind of crumbles and then you have to rebuild in a way that you want to rebuild, so intentionally, right?
Yeah.
Because you really had a series, you just laid out, there's probably 3 or 4 chapter 2 moments in that time period in your life, right? Through your career transitions, experiences that you had at work, experiences you were having as a mother, the surgery, but there was really an overarching theme within there. Yeah. And I think it's reminding me our fearless leader, Oprah Winfrey.
Yes, our mentor.
Always says that life speaks to you, and life speaks to you. It starts out in whispers, and then it gets louder and louder and louder until you hear it, right? And there was a real message there for you during that time in your life.
Yeah. And you know what's really interesting is, like, I'm a person, because of my background, that knows and understands mental health. And I know how to work with trauma, and I know how to recognize it in others.
Right.
I didn't see it in myself. And I didn't recognize that what I had gone through was a form of trauma. And that even though maybe it wasn't as, it didn't qualify in my mind compared to the people I'd worked with that in my mind had like real, air quote trauma, that it still deserved to be given attention and healing. Yeah. And what I learned is, like, the body doesn't care about social comparison. We as like social constructs care about that.
Right.
But the body doesn't care. The body's just like, I need help and you haven't been paying attention to me.
Yes.
And it doesn't care about whose is worse than others and how valid one person's is. And it, honestly, like the chapter 2 moment for me, I took the job at Clio 2 weeks after my surgery, and it was March 16th, 2020. So the pandemic hit 2 weeks later. Yeah. And I was the head of HR. I didn't actually stop until a year later when I got the diagnosis. Like, it took a year of working with internal medicine. I just kept going even past the death.
Wow.
And so it wasn't until I got that diagnosis and I was like, this isn't okay. Like, I'm on the same path. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah, right.
So it's like, even in those moments, sometimes it takes like a wake up call to say, like, you got all the signs. Why are you not listening?
Yes.
And so I had to really like kind of regroup after that. And it took a lot. Like, that's how stubborn I am.
Did you have an element of guilt or blaming of yourself for being in this position? And I'm asking that because, Tess, you mentioned this as well. I think women, when we're overextending ourselves, it is looked upon as something like you're amazing, you're juggling everything. And also, and then if you have some kind of breakdown or breakthrough that it's too much, then it turns into this, like, you should have recognized it. Why did you take on so much? So did you have those feelings about yourself around the guilt and shame of doing it? And how were you able to let go of that or move past it or forgive yourself?
So every aspect of my experience was dominated by guilt. So that woman I saw in between helped me really understand that guilt was my biggest blocker that actually led me to that situation. And it was less about not recognizing it in myself. It was guilt at taking time away to take care of myself was what made me not, because I felt like I was taking time away from my family. And then it was guilt that when I did take time away from my family, that I wasn't spending time on like more productive things because like the emotional load of having a family and having a big job never ends. And then when I wasn't taking time for myself, I would like snap, and I was had a shorter fuse. I was like getting frustrated and like on edge with my partner, with my kids. And then I would have guilt about that.
Yes.
And so it was like actually me realizing that my guilt was holding me back from doing the thing that would actually allow me to spend more quality time with myself, but also with my family. And that was the antidote. And this woman, this like traditional Chinese medicine doctor, told me, you need to reframe the guilt into gratitude. So for instance,
love that.
If you are like, hey, I'm able to get off work at like 6 tonight, I could go home and, put my kids to bed, or I could go and do this like meditation class or yoga class. And instead of feeling guilty for, not spending that 30 minutes or 40 minutes with the kids during that time, be thankful for the 20 minutes you had before you went to work and that they got that time of connection with
Yes.
you. And so focus on what you are doing and feeling gratitude for that
Yes.
rather than guilt for what you're not doing.
Right.
So it's that
so
shift
good.
from like a deficit to like an abundance mindset.
Yes.
And that was really transformative. Is like whenever I noticed that guilt come up, I was like, oh, just focus on what you did do today and be grateful for that because they're
That's
getting
really
that from
great.
you.
Yes. I really need to hear that right
So
now.
what are the big changes that you've made, right? Like from building your life now more intentionally. And I heard around the quality time with the family and like what that looks like. But what are some other things?
So, I mean, I think number one was, I can chat about this at length, but I know you'll probably ask me about this later. Like just finding a job that was more values aligned. So I didn't feel like I was having to mask up to go to work every day.
Yes.
But then I went on this like what I call like my year of wellness after I got the diagnosis. So that was all of 2022 for me. And it included mindfulness. So it included central nervous system resetting. So I basically stopped everything that was activating or sparking my central nervous system in unhealthy ways. So I stopped doing the like high intensity, like calorie burning, exercise. And I focused on slow, intentional movements without worrying about like, oh, I'm not going to lose the baby weight or this isn't going to lead to like the outcome I wanted. It's like, well, this is the process I need.
Yes.
Daily meditation, which I have a feeling you both probably have something.
You're speaking our language.
Something to say,
Yeah.
and just getting into that practice of like coming back to myself and like.
And had you meditated before?
So I'm trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness practices as a therapist, but I wasn't practicing when I was preaching, right? Like I was helping other people with the techniques and I wasn't building it into my daily practice.
Right.
Yes.
So just carving out that time for me, and it didn't have to be, 20 minutes or 30 minutes a day. It could literally be like a 5-minute mindful practice of brushing my teeth.
Yes.
Like
Okay, great.
the little micro moments, right?
Yeah, this is really, really good and helpful for people that don't know where to start with meditation. So talk more about mindful teeth brushing because that could be huge unlock for somebody.
Yeah. So it was again, like coming back to the daily practices that I was doing mindlessly and trying to make them more mindful so that it felt like it was incorporated in my day and not something else I had to add in or fit in. And so it was the little moments, but it was also things like the way that my anxiety and postpartum anxiety manifested for me a lot of the time was in insomnia. So I would put on sound bath music and before bed, and I'd put it on a sleep timer. I still do this. And I would just be able to sort of track my racing thoughts and be able to come back to the sound. I needed like a physical cue to bring myself back. So even that is a form of mindfulness, right? So don't be afraid to use the things that you need. You don't have to sit there in silence. You can use a guided meditation. You can use an app. You can use a song or a noise. And those things aren't crutches, right? Like there's not like a
really
right way to do it.
Yes.
So those things were really helpful. And then honestly, to be really like transparent, started taking SSRIs.
What is that?
It's a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, also known as like an antidepressant or a mood stabilizer.
Yes.
That for me, I didn't necessarily have the depression I needed to deal with. It was the anxiety. And clinically, it supports both because those are often go hand in hand.
Right.
So being okay saying I needed clinical intervention was amazing.
Yes.
And then the other thing that was super powerful that I would encourage like anyone to look into if you have the ability or interest was neurofeedback. So it was basically a form of therapy that resets your brain waves by helping your brain carve out new neural pathways when you are in an activated state. And so it's very non-invasive. It's not putting anything into your brain. It's actually measuring your outputs and just using like physical cues, like little sounds to help almost like rejig your brain to take a different route into a more
That's so interesting.
like balanced
Is that
frequency.
where you watch something on a screen and you have headphones on and there's sounds associated with this like bouncing?
Exactly.
Yes, I've
so
seen that.
it's like they hook you up to like electrodes to measure your own brain's outputs. The electrodes aren't putting anything in. They're just measuring your own brain frequencies.
Right.
And then what it does is you're listening to music through headphones and oftentimes also watching like some like, weird laser stuff on a TV.
Yeah.
And anytime your brain is measured as being in like too high of a frequency, it will just do a little blip in the music. It almost sounds like a record skipping. And then your brain eventually starts to recognize and associate that blip with being in too activated of a state. And then it will
right.
self-regulate and go into like a lower frequency.
Yes.
And eventually your brain just starts doing that on its own. So it'll start
Right.
recognizing when you're too activated and start putting you into a more, less activated balanced state.
So fascinating.
It's amazing.
It's incredible.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Nat, I feel like, there's going to be a lot of people listening to this who are going to be able to connect with something you said or all of the things you said. I think any woman who has children and works is going to connect with 90% of this. What is one piece of advice that you would give someone who connects to any or all of your story?
I think number one is don't minimize your own needs. Like hurt people.
Yes.
Right. And I saw that in so many different aspects of my career and personal life. And just because someone else has something that you perceive as being like more in need or more serious than yours does not mean you don't deserve to address your own needs, right? Like we all deserve goodness. We all deserve to heal. We all deserve to move forward with joy in our lives. And it starts with you not minimizing what you're experiencing.
Yes.
And giving yourself grace.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's when you do that, you're able to be like, okay, now what do I need?
Yes.
And then you can feel empowered to take that next step, whatever it looks like to you.
Yes. And I think with your work in particular, like anybody who is a teacher and you're a psychologist, a clinician, you're in HR, like when you're holding space for another person, it's so much more powerful when you have been to the depths of yourself and you've done the healing work and the processing work and the clearing work for you to then support somebody else, right, in their own journey.
I have no time or patience for inauthentic connections. And
Amen.
like, I don't want to be around someone that has their shit all together because I also know that that's not true. They don't.
Exactly.
So I feel like there's such a power in being able to, it doesn't mean you have to like go and like air your dirty laundry in every interaction, but there's such a power in connecting with people over like the messy parts of life and not just like the bright shiny things.
Yes.
And I don't know,
that can just be with your inner circle, like that could be with your innermost closest people because, so much of what we go through is sacred, right? And is private or personal. Some people feel called to share on a larger platform and larger scale. Thank God for them because they help so much of us heal and process. And then other people do it on a much smaller scale and it's all okay, But I think the takeaway is like, we're all in it and and if you're not now, you're going to be.
Exactly. Like, you're going to go through something in your life that's going to test you. And it's not whether you go through those things that is like the sign of like a life well lived, right? It's like how you handle them when they come up. And like, I think the other thing is like we're bred in this society to think we have to go through it all alone. Like there are communities around you. There are professionals. There are people that want to help you.
Yes.
And it is such a form of respect for the love and appreciation you have for the people around you when you're able to say like, hey, can you help me with this thing? Or can I borrow your confidence for a second? Or can you just come and watch my kids for a moment? Like people want to be asked that.
There's so much pressure to make it seem like you have it all together and to make it seem look a certain way. But I feel like in my experience, whenever I've been authentic or shared or had somebody share with me, it just makes you love that person more. It makes you more connected, deeper. And like, I feel like I only have one speed now. It's like full authenticity or nothing. Like, and like both ways, So I feel like I'm also just dragging on this conversation because I don't want you to leave. And I'm really, really loving every minute with you and I don't want it to end.
Okay, I do want to spend a little bit of time touching on your current company, your current role, because I have been watching you and connecting with you and learning about what you've been doing, and it is big things. It's an exciting company. Can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to Clio? You spoke about values alignment. Talk to us about what aligned for you there.
Yeah. I mean, look, the role at Clio presented at like the worst possible time in my personal life.
So
I think I mentioned this.
It's so interesting.
But the one thing I'm so grateful for is that I said yes, because it was such an important move for me, and I've been able to actually not have to deprioritize my own health while being there. Like, I am at a company that actually was really supportive of me, and I'm in my role. I'm able to, especially because I started literally on the day one of work from home in the pandemic. Yeah. I've been able to use the privilege of my position of power at Clio to help design a workplace to allow other people to prioritize themselves too. And when I learned about Clio, we are, on the surface, elevator pitch is like, we make software for lawyers. We help them transition their businesses to the cloud and help them be able to practice remotely. And it's an all-in-one solution, and it's incredible. But at our core, we are an access to justice organization.
Oh, wow.
And we help connect people who desperately need legal services with people that can provide them. And to me, having worked in the justice system and
I
seeing
didn't know this.
that access to justice gap that exists,
Right.
it just clicked with me. It was like, this is the system that desperately needs to be transformed, and I can help create a workforce for people to be able to make this company successful and be able to tackle this mission that we have to transform the legal experience for all. And I feel so deeply connected to that, and so deeply connected to the employees that are working so hard to make that happen every day for our customers.
What a full circle moment for you, taking your background. Like, that came into your life at that time for a reason.
Yeah, it's so
How
serendipitous.
wild. It really is.
I just feel so lucky that I'm able to blend like my passion for people development and human development with this like deep, connection to social justice, and particularly like improvements in our justice system.
I have 1,000 more questions for you, but we'll offline it. We're going to move into speed questions.
Okay. I'm looking at the speed questions that you've prepared, and I'm going rogue, man.
Okay. Go for it. You go first.
I need to know what your star sign is.
Okay. That's a good question.
Okay. Does that just mean like my astrological sign?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a Scorpio.
You're Scorpio.
I know.
When's your birthday?
November 9th.
Okay.
Okay.
I know nothing about that, but Tess will tell us.
Love that. I'm just.
Do you know what's really interesting?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think I'm like a typical Scorpio, because they're like moody and jealous and like all those things, and I'm like the most like not
right.
Yes.
I'm like a
But there's
pretty,
always
bright.
higher vibrations and lower vibrations of every sign, right?
Yes, but the thing that resonates with me is like deep loyalty, deep connection to the people like around me and care. And on my actual birthday, it was the day the Berlin Wall came down, which was such a sign of like social justice in the world.
Yes.
And it feels like a lot of parts of my personality make sense when I think about that.
Wow.
And like a point in history,
Yes.
Not
and
the same
your
year,
soul
I don't
purpose.
think. But yeah.
I really love that.
Yeah.
Very poignant.
Okay, referenced your passion for late 90s, early 2000s hip hop R&B. What was the last song you listened to today on your way here?
Ooh, okay. It's like the song that I feel like it's like my theme song. I always listen to it in the morning. It's Juicy by the Notorious B.I.G.
Best answer.
It is like my favorite.
Can we play that over this part of it?
It's my favorite. And like to the point, this is so embarrassing. When I did my master's dissertation, there's like this like panel of academics, and I opened up with like a quote from the Juicy song because I like made it relate to my topic, and they just kind of like cocked their head and they're like, huh. And I'm like
they weren't clicking.
Yeah,
it wasn't landing.
It didn't fit. But I was like, it makes sense to me.
I love that. Yeah. Okay. I also really want to ask this question because I'm always blown away by your cooking and you have a real creative spark in the kitchen. What is your go-to weeknight recipe?
Ooh, it's always like a pasta.
Oh, okay.
So I'm Italian and Portuguese. Cooking is like how I show my love.
Yes.
And like it's my comfort food. It's like quick and I can like load it with really
good.
delicious like veggies, and my kids are really into it now. And so I would say it's like a penne alla vodka, or like I make this really amazing like broccoli and Parmesan, like cheesy pasta. And yeah, it's just
Love
probably
that.
a pasta.
Okay, I'm going to do one more.
Yeah.
It's not on the list. I want to know, what is your like one piece of advice for your like to keep your marriage healthy?
That's such a good question. My husband and I were talking about this because we've seen some shit together.
Yes.
And I think it is when you can fully support the other person in their own individuation that you don't think that you have to move through life in the same ways together all the time.
Right.
Yes.
And when you don't apply a weird sense of like guilt to them for doing the things they need to do that are important for them as a human.
Yes.
So like support them going on the guys' trips or the girls'
Right.
trips.
Yes.
Support them in their like own fitness journey. Support them in like the thing they're dreaming about, and don't engage in the tit for tat. Like, oh, well, you were doing that. I was at home
Yes.
doing this. Like
Yes.
that serves no one.
Yes.
Right.
You know? I think it's just, yeah, like important to see them as like a whole person that exists outside of you in your marriage, and like
Right.
letting them like explore the things that make them feel good.
You are a gift. I am so like, I really don't want her to go. Can we lock the door, Brent? Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
is so,
From
like,
the bottom of our hearts.
This
Yes.
was cathartic.
Yes.
You know? I
Right
feel
back
like
at
so
you.
blessed. Thank you.
Thanks for letting me share a bit about my story. I
Oh my
appreciate
gosh.
it.
Thank you for
It's
being
such an
so
honor.
authentic and
Yes.
vulnerable with us.
Yeah, thank
Of course.
you.
Only way.
Only
The
way.
only way,
Yeah.
babe.
That's a wrap.
Fuck me. That was the best episode we've ever done. Ever.
That was so good,
Like-
Nat. Like, I know your story, but hearing it again,
Oh my God.
like,
Let's just cancel the other guest.
yeah, I know. I don't want to talk to her.
And let's just play this episode forever. I want to quit the podcast now.
I like
Yes,
Sometimes I'm like,